about one. We just concluded a meeting with superintendents, doing some updates with them, and want to make certain that clerks all have the opportunity to log in here with us as we get started. I'm Cheryl Allen. I work as the Deputy Superintendent at the OPI. Jay Phillips is with us, as he has been from the get-go. Jay has recently accepted the position as the new Chief Financial Officer for the OPI. So we're very pleased with his willingness to step into that role and what he will bring to all of our districts with his depth of experience. So thank you for being with us, Jay. We have Megan Peel with us, who has been a steady rock through a process since the legislature created the opportunity for us to work together much closer, and really appreciate her insights and input. So we're going to get started with Jay giving you a brief update related to elements that clerks are most interested in, and then we'll stand for Q&A with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Deputy Allen. Good morning, everybody. Real quick, I'm just going to share. Tristan, can you make it so I can share my screen real quick? There we go. Thank you. Okay, guys, so what I'm bringing up is, if you guys recall from some of our previous meetings, we had created a match expenditure detail form for you guys to utilize for the IGT process. A couple key things of change that I want to address this morning. In the previous version, if you remember, there was a couple things that we needed from you for that when you submitted your claims with that match payment. Initially, we were going to request that the copy of the negotiated contract was submitted with the first submission of the month's claims. And so, again, if bridge funding was to be fully exhausted this month, then in January we would actually start the IGT process. And so we were asking for a copy of that third-party provider contract. We actually are now going to change that a little bit, and what we'll need is we will need a copy of your contract. It doesn't, timing-wise, does not have to be with the submission of that first claim, but we just need to make sure we do get that. Throughout the year, that if there is an actual renegotiation or an amendment made to that contract, an OPI would request that you could send us a version of that as well. And the primary thing that we're looking at is we just want to look at the language around the FMAP portion and the percentage on that. So again, when we get that, we won't need that on the first submission. So with that claim submission, the one thing we were still going to continue to request is we will asked for a printout from your accounting system, again, reflecting the match payment source. Again, as we've talked about from the beginning, that we need to make sure that OPI needs to certify that is actually coming from a non-federal source. And so in a general accounting printout, it doesn't need to be anything of great detail. The only thing we need to be able to determine is that, one, that it's coming from a non-federal source, and that, two, just the dollar amount that was committed. So basically that it ties to what you've submitted for the match requirement, the match piece for that month's claim submission. The other thing we had initially talked about, and if you remember our discussions, one of the things I was kind of going back and forth on was the necessity to have a copy of the third-party provider invoice. And so OPI has determined that we don't think that's actually going to be necessary now. With that copy of that negotiated rate contract, I think that's sufficient for us to do our certification here, and so we won't need that invoice. So the secondary key thing that we'll need for during the first claim submission, again, is going to be that certification form. Now the form, if you guys remember last time, it had a bunch of calculations that were included. It had some links to both what we were calling direct as well as non-direct expenditures. And so we're not going to require all of that pieces to be actually filled out. It'll be just the printout and signature from your authorized rep that is certifying that the monies that are coming in are actually from a non-federal source, and then they meet the requirements of the IGT process. What we will still continue to ask for is that with the certification of the costs that are associated with CSCT, we've actually taken out that direct piece. And if you remember, we had conversations about monthly being able to show maybe if you do have direct charges to a project reporter code that identifies the expenditure activity as CSCT related, we're not going to require that. We're going to actually move more over to the non-direct, or as commonly referred to as more of the in-kind, is where again you can actually take in for those costs you identify that are in kind to the program. Of course, a common example would be something like rent. You can actually take that cost and annualize it, and then determine or factor out what percentage of that that rental cost is actually applies to helping to aid in the services for the CSCT program. And so again, it'll be a one-time submission. Again, which we will ask for that on that first claim submission. So we have that, and we have that certification. Throughout the year, we did get a question in our last meeting that we just came out of, that in the event that you guys do a preliminary projection out and identified those costs, if something was to change, that do you have the ability to submit a revised calculation? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. With anything throughout the process operationally, there's always going to be changes. And so if you identify something of significance that you'd like to be reflected in OPI's documentation, then you're more than welcome to submit that. Okay. And part of this, we're hoping, understanding that upfront, that one-time, identification of these costs, again, will take a little bit of time, but at least it'll be just that one time. This will not need to be submitted every month with your certification. It'll just be that one-time submission on that submitted with that first claim. And of course, the last thing is just going to be the check or the warrant. One thing that I've heard clearly from schools is that the time frame of when the schools receive the report from OPI that notifies the school of what their match claim amount requirement is for that month, having that 10 days to do your processing at your school. One was for the certification, but then also including that direct and those non-direct pieces. Now we'll just have to actually just do the warrant. We're looking at doing a ACH process. We're working with one of our vendors who's a partner here at the state that actually provides the ACH platform so that the school could actually go in there, initiate an ACH. The system itself will have a PDF upload functionality. And so the supporting documentation, again, if it's the contract, the accounting system printout, and then that actual signed certification form, you'll be able to upload that. And the intention of that, of course, is to mitigate the need to actually send something in hard copy to us, but then also to accommodate the short timeline for the turnaround from when the time you receive that report until the deadline is for OPI to receive the payment and the supporting documentation. Okay. In addition, so because of some of these changes and then also some discussions we've had, we're going to be meeting with some of our counterparts in the state to go over a little bit about some of the accounting guidance that we've come up with. And we look to actually enhance that and clarify some things based on some of the questions we have. So if you do go out to our OPI website, you will notice that the guidance actually has been taken down temporarily. But we're hoping to have a new and revised version up for everybody by the end of next week. And so those are some of the key things, and we can open it up for questions. But again, the intention here is that really to pinpoint the necessary documents we need in order for OPI to do their certification, and then also to mitigate the risk at the local level that we are clean and clear that in the event of the auditors coming in that there won't be any reversion of funds having to be sent back to CMS. So with that, I'll turn it back to Deputy Allen or open for questions.
Thank you, Jay. So we are here to listen to what questions you have. If we can answer them, we will. If we're needing to do more digging, we will do that. So Mike, I see that you're off mute. Good morning, welcome, happy holidays. So we'll take your question.
Well, and thanks Jay and Cheryl. I do have questions. I also I see that there's work been done on this to streamline it for us. I appreciate that. I think we still have some things to address, but I appreciate the fact that there's been some steps made. I'm looking at I took a screenshot of the spreadsheet that you shared, and I guess I have a couple questions with regards to number 2 and number 3 on the supporting documents issue. First of all, with regards to this accounting system printout showing the payment source, can we visit a little bit about that? First of all, there's another tab on there that was your certification, I think, where schools have to just sign indicating that the match that we're sending into you is coming from non-federal sources. This printout, first of all, seems to be duplicative of what we're confirming to you via a certification. Second of all, the accounting system printout, we deal with match grants all the time. I'm not aware of any other instances where we have to share that, and I think one of the reasons is it's a journal entry away from being obsolete and incorrect information that we're sharing. Can we talk more about that and whether we actually need to send a paperwork in every time with that check?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so thanks for the questions. So the payment source report. And so one of the things that OPI has to do is we need to certify, like you said, that the money that's being submitted comes from a non-federal source. Okay, we are requesting, you're right, the certification that you guys are stating that it is coming in from a non-federal source. So part of our thing is that if we don't have some type of documentation, that we can't actually certify the source of that funding that's being submitted. Okay, the intention of that is one, that in the event that if CMS is to come down and they're to look at, or our local auditors come in to look at our processes and what we have for documentation in the certification process, that report gives us the sufficient documentation that we can show that we did our certification of the actual funding source. Okay, the hopes in that is one is that we meet the requirements of CMS, but then also that it would also prevent hopefully the auditors needing to go to the local districts and asking and requesting for additional documentation to certify that. As much as we can actually streamline that and centralize it here at the state, and we can provide assurance over that process, that's our intention, and we'll try to do that. Right.
So the long and short answer, Mike, is yes, we can certainly visit more about that, I think is what Jay's communicating.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems, like I say, duplicative, and just it's kind of worthless information when we send this accounting printout to you, that it's just not real information. So thank you. I appreciate that. I look forward to continuing that discussion. Then on number 3, the certification form, the in-kind costs, those things. I appreciate that we've gone from monthly reports to annual reports. I think that's a step in the right direction. So before we talk about the specifics of that, I want to be clear about my understanding, and I guess this is a question. So an overall overview of the process is that once we get a bill from our providers, we will send, and I'm going to round, and hopefully everyone can work with me here. We will send a copy of our invoice plus $1 to the state, and then in return, after it goes through the process, we'll receive that dollar back plus the amount of the payment from DPHHS and OPI to make our payment to the provider. Is that correct so far?
Megan, will you take that question, please?
Yes, happy to. Hi, Mike. Yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit of detail just to make sure that I'm understanding so I can confirm. Your $1 would be the state share of the Medicaid payment, which then will end up with the Medicaid agency. We will then match it with roughly $2, like the 2/3 state, federal share. And then what we will pay you is just the Medicaid reimbursement as a whole, which is $3.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
And then Mike, real quick, Megan, I think if you can confirm this, that the third party provider that submits the claim in the MMI system is not actually submitting any type of invoice documentation. It's just a submission into the system, right?
So like normal business practice is that generally school districts have their third party mental health center do their claims submission for them. That's general practice. So yes, then you're correct. The mental health centers send a claim through our Medicaid processing system. So it's not really an invoice, but it's like just a medical claim for the services.
Let's be really clear here for a second. Every school district should know, because you're having to meet a match to that claim. So you should know exactly what that claim is or what that invoicing is, because you're the ones that have to account for that. So we have a couple questions in the chat. And Megan, I think this first one you probably could answer for us. With the 10-day turnaround, how will
Superintendent, can I finish? I wasn't
I
quite.
thought you were done with your
No,
three,
no,
with
no,
your
no,
three,
no.
Mike.
Sorry,
So
thank you.
yeah, so I'll
I
give you
appreciate
like
it.
another minute, and then I've got to give others an opportunity as well.
Sure. So the local dollar that we send to OPI in conjunction with our match, we will get 2 federal dollars back and 1 local dollar back. Then I heard on the previous meeting with the superintendents, DPHHS Director Meyer said that there's no further accounting requirements associated with this. There's nothing required by the federal, by CMS or anybody at the federal level with regards to this in-kind cost documentation or anything along that. Is that correct?
So I believe what you're asking is the federal government going to come and audit you on your IGT? And the answer to that is that they would not be looking at you at an audit purpose, whereas in certified public expenditure, they would. So the other side of that is the state match that you have submitted, saying that is part of the cost for those services that comes back to you. You would also have to identify on the state side for use of school district funds that you actually had costs related to that. And that's what Jay has been talking about with your non-direct costs that you would substantiate.
Right, and that's not a federal requirement, correct?
That is a requirement of the OPI with state funds.
Right, and can you show us where the authorization for that requirement is?
Yeah, Mike, we'll be happy to do that with you. And so if we've gotten through your questions, there are others with questions that need to have the same opportunity. So
sure, I've got a lot more, so I'll
I'm sure. So please give me a call and we'll be happy to take those.
I've emailed
Okay, so over to the chat. With the 10-day turnaround, how will clerks ever take a vacation? Well, we know the approximate due date of each month. Is there a way we can project a month out to help with that time frame? So Megan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, thank you for the question, Jolene. Jay is just sharing it now. We have created a year-long schedule because we do understand that it is tricky, and because of the way our claim system operates, it's not always like the last day of the month or things like that. So we have created this calendar specifically for the clerks and your accounting people, and hopefully it's helpful, and it just lays out what the dates are for every month. And we will continue to create this document as a tool for clerks.
Thanks, Megan. I just want to add, let me just add to it again. We've heard some of the concerns again about that 10-day window. Timing of one-time thing was also like with the board being able to approve payments going out. And then also, again, that mail time that's within the state can be kind of slow. So again, that's where I'm pressing really hard to try to get that ACH option open before we actually do that first claim submission. But again, for sure, by the time we had to do the second one. So for those that are looking that they want to shorten that time frame or have a way to submit that to us more timely, then that I believe that ACH should accommodate some of those concerns. Okay, so
This is Shara from Hellgate. My experience with the Medicaid claims currently is either for like the school services or the CSCT.
Chair, I think you went on mute, actually.
Sorry, Sheriff, we had a question on the table. We'll come right back to you here in just a second.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. So this was related to two CSCT providers with two very different per diem rates. Jay, do you want to tackle that?
Sorry, here real quick. I didn't see where the question was coming from. Sorry, Cheryl.
So it was in a
I'm sorry, I think I accidentally responded to that, not knowing exactly what would happen, but so Jay, the question said there are two different CSCT providers that are presenting different reimbursement rates in their contract. So I could also help, maybe we could call Dan afterwards and kind of talk through that with him.
Thank you, Megan.
But sorry, I didn't mean to remove that.
Thank you. Sheriff, over to you.
My understanding with Medicaid, either for CSCT or school services, is the claims are submitted into the system, and if they're like received by Thursday, the payment is issued on Monday. Is this now, and there's a system we can log in to see those payments, is this like changing all of that, and it's just going to be monthly?
The change to the monthly is only for CSCT services because of the utilizing the intergovernmental transfer for the state share. So any of your other Medicaid school-based services, like if you have speech therapy or OT or things like that, they will still continue to process, you know, the Thursday, Monday cycle. And then you will still be able to log into the provider portal and look at all of your remittance statements, and just like always, but with the CSCT claims, you'll just have like one big monthly payment.
So we have another question being asked. What is the result of not being able to meet the 10-day window requirement? Would it just delay our DPHHS payment to the following month?
So I can answer that too. Megan, you can chime in too. So from my understanding is that, well, I'm sorry, OPI, when we actually receive the match component of it, we will not actually release the payment or notify DPHHS that the payment can be released until we've done our certification process. And so if there is, again, a timing that it goes beyond that 10 days, then it would mean that the reimbursement, both the match component that you submitted as well as the CMS piece coming back to you would be held until the subsequent month.
So could we walk through for folks again, the $2 to $1 and how the in-kind or non-direct costs fit into that? Jay, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah. So again, when you submit that first actual claim, again, that in-kind component of it is where OPI is requesting that you submit your projections out or identification of those CSCT related costs. Again, these are not direct costs. These are things that are like that rent, a portion of rent, a portion of your utilities. Again, if there's specific staff like a principal that you don't directly charge a portion of their salary to a CSCT project reporter code, but they do provide support for that program itself. Then again, identification of those costs, again, submitting that as an annualized, then OPI will use that as you submit in your claims. We'll track that, let's say if you projected out $100,000 of identified in-kind expenses, as claims are submitted, we'll document that and kind of keep a log ourselves. If in the event you get close to exceeding what you've initially presented, then my staff will reach out and work with you to do a revised submission of that report itself. But again, as we've discussed, is that in order to ensure that under audit and that we've got supporting documentation that we are still going to require that to be submitted up front.
Thank you. So we have another question. Could a warrant detail report from Black Mountain be included with the accounting codes showing as the backup?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and Lisa, thank you. And so again, I think the reports that you guys do, and my apologies, I'm not versed with the different systems that you guys use at the local level. But if you were able to print out something like that that shows that you had issued a warrant, and that report itself reflects and can show what the funding source was, then that would be perfect. That would work out. So, and again, the key thing to remember is that we just need to be able to see that amount that was being submitted and verify the actual funding source itself.
Okay, I think we've gotten through the questions from folks. Lisa, I see you're off mute. Did you have a question? Mike, you indicated that you had a couple more questions for us. So in the time we have left, we'll go back to you for additional questions you had identified you still had to ask.
Sorry, I was on mute. So we had some questions come across the Masbo chat box yesterday with regards to what happens if the what we call in-kind costs aren't sufficient. Can you please address that? What your intentions are there?
Yes, thanks, Mike. So again, I think that'll be kind of a case-by-case basis. That in the event that a school is struggling to come up with those certification costs, then I would say that OPI and them could work together to resolve that issue.
So what happens if you can't?
So again, Mike, I'd say that it's, we'd have the discussion with them in the internal level, kind of see what kind of costs that they're actually identifying. If there's recommendations that OPI might have, and again, working through what they've presented, if there's other things that they haven't considered. If they haven't, then it'd be a matter of, I think, figuring out and projecting what they anticipate their match actual liability is going to be for that year. I'm not sure to what level schools are going to be completing an activity like that. But a suggestion would be is that, kind of looking at pre-COVID or pandemic numbers for CSCT services, that might give you at least a general basis and starting point to determine whether or not what you're identifying for this year's annualized cost is going to be sufficient or not. So again, Mike, until we actually get in, I think in that circumstance, then we'll have to work with the schools individually to see what they've all identified. Because there was a good point that was brought up earlier about the, trying to come up, I think John was talking, how do they to verify that everybody's doing it consistently. It was one of the superintendents was bringing up, and that's some of the things that we'll address. Right?
Thanks, Jay. I see we're running out of time. There's lots of questions around this process still. We appreciate and acknowledge all the work that you guys have done and the steps that we've made. I think there's more work to be done, and just would repeat the request to have a meeting with all the stakeholders, OPI, school districts, DPHHS, and our providers in the same room at the same time to try to resolve these issues. Thanks for the meeting.
So Jay, we're going to hold for just a second. We've got some questions that showed up as well from other folks. And when calculating in-kind expenses, are we required to use the approved indirect cost rate we received from the OPI, or can they use a different rate?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it would be based on the OPI approved rate. And so what I'll do is I'll work with our school finance team for those that have an actual approved IDC, and we can send out to you what your actual approved rate is if you don't know what that is. And then also, if I know that, like with the ARP, the ESSER funding, we've had quite a few schools in the past that did not actually have an indirect cost rate, that we're still actually allowing those to be submitted. So if it's something you still want to look like you want to entertain, then we can work with the school finance division to get those submitted and approved.
Megan has answered the question related to bridge funding. The final Final one is you mentioned in the superintendent's meeting that accounting guidance will be posted next week. Could you briefly explain those changes? And I think you may have already, but if there's anything else to add, and then we will say happy holidays to everyone. Best wishes, and thank you so much for being here and asking the heartfelt questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Jay, did you have an answer on that?
Oh, I'm sorry for the accounting guidance. My apologies. Yeah, so the accounting guidance, I think some of the primary change is going to be again reflective of some of the requirements of the documentation that's required. But then also we've also had some additional information come to us that we want to add some clarification, and then also some additional pieces. And so we'll be working with some of our educational partners to get that reviewed, amended, and actually posted again, hopefully by the end of next week.
Question is, we know that we're going to try to keep committed to the time for folks. So the question from Jane is, so we won't have to submit the unnecessary accounting report?
So Jane, thank you. So I think what Mike was kind of alluding to is the potential that the report itself and then also the certification coming in may be duplicative. And so again, that's something we'll consider, and then if we'll have that in the updated guidance as well. Great question. Thank you.
Okay, folks, thank you so much. Happy holidays. Nice to see faces and names that are recognized, and we appreciate all the diligent and hard work you're doing on behalf of our students and our schools, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thanks, guys.